Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elizabeth Williams, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, A Clear Path, How Career Development Ensures an Organization's Future Growth and Sustainability. This webinar qualifies for one SHRM and HRCI credit. We'll be providing the credit information to you on the closing slide and in our follow-up email. We'll be recording today's session and we'll make it available within 24 hours. It's now my privilege to introduce today's panel. Today, I'm joined by leaders of the Raymond's HR Solutions team and Transition Services team, Cheryl Cooch and Gerald Wernett. Today, we're going to talk about career development and how it can be a foundational piece for your organization's growth, including the key elements necessary for career development roles, examples of successful career development with succession planning. That's a lot of career development. So let's get started. So Cheryl, what is career development?
Thanks, Elizabeth. What a great question. And before my colleagues, Elizabeth and Gerald, share some fabulous and fantastic examples of how you can utilize career development, I think it's important maybe that we all get on the same page with what we're talking about when we talk about career development. As I see it, career development definition has three distinct parts, and they're in blue on the slide, if you can tell. The first one is acquiring skills. That's the development part of career development. But then there's this preparation part. It's the getting ready for something. And then there's the opportunity part for something in the future. So career development is all about preparation, getting me ready for opportunities when they present themselves. And we never know when opportunities are going to present themselves. And we want to be ready, more ready than we are today for opportunities. And we certainly never want to be passed over for a promotion. So let's take a look at career development taking a deeper dive. What I want to do is clear up some misconceptions about career development. Many people think when they think of career development, they think of it as something that's sort of done to them or given to them, right? You're a new hire, you get your badge, you get your computer, you get your benefits. And by the way, here's a paper, here's your career development to go along with all of that as a new hire. Some people think of career development as being universal for a particular job category. So there's one career development plan for an administrative assistant, there's one for a quality associate, there's one for a financial professional. But really, isn't that thinking a little bit flawed? Because not everybody starts at the same spot, do they? And not everybody learns at the same pace, and nor does everybody want to go to whatever level the career development plan has. The thinking is a little bit flawed. Some people also think of career development sort of as a set pathway, a guarantee, a job guarantee program. That is, you do job A, then you do job B, then you do job C. And it doesn't always work that way. So what it is, really, it's individualized. It's a long-term look at my career, at my future. And if you look at that third bullet in the what it is, essentially what it is aligning what I want, what I'm good at, what my interests are, with what might become available. And we marry those two things together. And in doing so, that's creating career development plans. Go to the next, please. So who should have a development plan? You might be wondering. I'll give you a second to think about that for just a second. Who should have one? Is it for everybody? My answer is yes. Everybody should have a career development plan. It's not just for managers. It's not just for high potentials, although succession planning might be a career development plan option for your high potential employees. Everybody should have a career development plan, even your new hires. A lot of folks say, well, no career development plan for my new hires. We wait a year or 2 years or whatever it might be. Get them started right away with a career development plan right out of the gate. All employees deserve and should have a career development plan.
That's very valid, Cheryl. And why is career development so important?
Well, Elizabeth, because I said so, of course. Well, no, that's not acceptable. I know that's not acceptable. There's a direct relationship between career development, organizations that support career development, And important things like retention, turnover, and even talent acquisition or attracting talent to organizations. Here's some data here for you to contemplate as it relates to the benefits of career development. A third of employees, only a third of employees, are satisfied with their current advancement opportunities. That means 70% are not. About half of our workforce considers growth and career development opportunities when selecting their next job over salary. Oh, we often think of salary as being the most important, but not for half of them. This one is most startling to me. 86% of professionals said that they would change jobs. They would change jobs if an alternate organization provided more opportunities, right, for professional and career development. 34% did. They said lack of career development was one of the main reasons that drew them away from their current employer, and 34% increase in retention. So for those organizations that are interested in retaining, this could be the clue to that. And I'm going to tell you what, isn't it far less challenging and probably far less expensive, likely, to focus on career development than to worry about replacing an employee who's left the organization and then all the training and everything that comes with it? There's a great benefit to that. Next, please. And there are obvious benefits to focusing in on career development, aren't there? The first one we already talked about, it increases retention, candidate attraction. 1 and 2 are combined. Because when you focus on career development, people talk. And they talk with each other and you get to be known. And not only do you get to be known, but you can share that with the world that you're an organization that focuses on it. Maybe that 86% number is looking pretty good for you, be able to attract some folks away. But there's more benefits than just that, right? There's better performance. People are developing, they get better at stuff. They get better at stuff, we have better outcomes. There's good news on the performance side. Employee engagement's directly related to the degree to which people have opportunities to grow. And then one that people don't talk about all that often, that I like to point out, is sort of organizational readiness. How ready is your workforce for tomorrow's challenges, to meet your 3 or 5 year strategic plan, if you have one? Are you innovative? And it creates sort of your own pool of candidates, right? So if you start to develop folks in different areas and somebody does leave or has to leave or maybe gets relocated, you may have yourself your own pool. You don't have to go through all the recruitment process that might be required to find another employee. So you're sold. I hope you're sold. Are you sold? You want to get started right away? You think this is really important because it is? So what do you do now? So you might be wondering, am I set up to do this? How well am I set up to do this? Can I do this? Do I have what it takes to focus on career development, maybe for my team or maybe for my organization? All you need is 3 things. And we're going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. You need organizational commitment. You need managers who can actually have the conversations, know how to have the conversations and create plans and support the plans of their team members. And obviously you need some learning resources, right? You need some ways for people to be able to develop. So let's take a look at organizational commitment. So what is the commitment that you need to take? I'm committed, Cheryl. I want to do this. Well, if you are committed, what you need first is you need to be able to provide time. You know, my years of working with organizations and training, this is the one that is the biggest barrier to career development that I've found, is time. They often say, yeah, I want to train people, I want to develop their skills, but we're just too busy. You know, we can't take people off the floor. We can't take people away from their workstation. We can't allocate time to this. Well, what time do you need to allocate? Well, you need time for the managers to have the conversations to find out what the career development plan is going to be. You need to allow time for them to go and develop those skills, and whether that's through courses or other means. We're going to talk about those here just momentarily. You need time for the manager to coach and provide opportunities for people to practice their skills and develop, and obviously to give feedback as well. So it does take some time, but I'm going to tell you that the time that you spend on this activity pays off far greater in the times that I've seen than other kinds of activities that you might be using that time for. What else? What other kind of commitment do you need? Well, you need to have a commitment to invest in resources. resources. Yeah, resources like time to train and provide guidance to the manager, learning resources, and tools and tips and guidance around this. You need to invest in those managers, and you need to commit to the fact that this is an ongoing process. This isn't something we just do in January. You know, January 1 to 31st, that's career development month. No, career development continues. And even after I get my new opportunity, if I do through my career development planning activities, guess what? I got another one, right? Because now my sights are on maybe another more indifferent opportunities.
And Cheryl, can an employee create and fulfill a career development plan on their own? Can they do it on their own without the leader's input?
Great question, Elizabeth. Well, one I get quite commonly, and there are plenty of organizations that empower their, or try to, or attempt to, I should say, empower their employees to create their own a career development plan. They give them a little guidance and say, here, it's all yours, go create it. However, the manager is really the key to creating great career development planning. Why? Well, the manager is sort of the gatekeeper in some respects. If I wanted to develop my skills and I need to attend a training class, my manager might need to give me permission to be away from the workplace, for example. If I wanted to shadow somebody in another department I'm interested in, well, my manager might need to coordinate that with the other manager and provide some guidance in that respect. If I wanted to be considered for another position within the organization, or I wanted to explore openings, my manager might need to be my advocate. Or my manager might need to be able to provide some guidance on how to interview and what kinds of opportunities are there as well. Let's take a look at the role of the manager and how important it is when we're talking about career development. Now, I know there's a lot of words on the screen here. This is a very fundamental, generic look at the career development creation and career development conversation process that a manager would have with, right? With and in coordination with their employee. You see the numbers there, 1, 2, 3, 4 starts up in the top right there. So manager says, yeah, I'm in, I'm trained, I'm in, I'm ready to go. The first part of the conversation is identifying this, talking to the employee about their strengths. What are their strengths? Maybe what are their weaknesses? What are their ambitions? What are they good at? Second part is, what kind of careers does that align with? What's available? What kinds of things might they be thinking about? What are their interests as well? Maybe the manager also provides some guidance to them, says, you know, people like you who are good at this kind of skill or can do these types of things, maybe these are some things for you to explore. So the second part of the conversation is really exploring different options. What are some ways and what are some targets, you can think of it like that, for career development. The third part is, how do I get there? So I might identify the finance department as somewhere that I might want to grow and learn more about. Well, how do I learn about finance in the finance department? What are the skills I need that I don't have currently? And what are the methods? How am I going to do that? Am I going to sit with somebody? Am I going to take a class? You know, what is it? And then from all of that conversation comes the actual plan itself, which includes the goals and milestones. So we're going to take a look at 2, 3, and 4 here, just briefly. Again, we're just going to touch on these briefly and give you some more insights into what is entailed in exploration, skills, and planning. So let's talk about career development pathways. I like to say, you know, up is not the only way. People develop their career in a variety of ways. Let's assume I'm a baker. There I am right at the top, right, with my baker's hat on. It's coming up on Thanksgiving. I thought pumpkin pie might be a good example for our webinar today in the month of November. So let's say I'm a baker and my chef comes to me and says, let's create a development plan, Cheryl, career development plan. And I say, great. And he says, what are your interests? And I say, you know what? I can make the best standard pumpkin pie there is. Nobody makes a crust and a filling like I can. I am the best at pumpkin pie. But you know what? I want to learn how to make pumpkin pie a lot of different ways. Fancy crust, I like to call fancy pumpkin pie, right? Maybe different flavors, maybe ingredients added in. Like, I want to get better at the pumpkin pie. I'm going to expand it. right? Even more. But maybe it's not just fancy pumpkin pie, but I want to learn how to make all pies. I want to become the pie master, maybe. So we call this skill mastery. And people get kind of frustrated with folks who want to explore their career development and skill mastery. I hear it from the managers often, and here's how I hear it from them. They'll say, well, they don't want to develop into any other job. They don't want, and then they say they don't need a development plan because they don't want to develop, because they don't want to go up the ladder, or maybe that a different position. But career development also is staying in place and becoming the master. Is there innovations? Is there technologies to try? Are there efficiencies in the way we do it? Are there other systems and things we can try? Skill mastery is one career path. Second one, we often think of skill expansion as lateral movement sometimes. Sometimes it has to do with moving to other departments, functions, or other areas of the organization. So again, pumpkin pie expert, right? Plain pumpkin pie. Maybe I want to learn how to make some other baked goods. Still kind of in my arena, but I want to learn how to make pies, or excuse me, cakes and cookies and maybe cupcakes, things like that. But then maybe I want to advance into like candies and tarts, or petite fours, as we might say. So that's skill expansion. For some folks, this is lateral. Sometimes it's not a lateral move, but it's taking a look at other areas. And then the obvious other career development pathway could be very much in leadership, right? Maybe I want to lead a team. Maybe I want to lead leaders, lead an organization, even in some cases. And Cheryl's going to talk a little bit about that here in just a few minutes. So when we think about how people develop, I want you to think that it's not always upward, and it's not always a position. A lot of organizations say this to me, Cheryl, we're flat. We don't have a lot of opportunities in our organization. We're not hiring a lot. So therefore, they put their hands up just like this. They put their hands up and they say, well, we can't do career development. And I say, well, but yes, you can. And yes, you should, because career development isn't always about a new job or an upward movement. It's about expanding my skills. And once again, doing what? Preparing for when something becomes available. Because if I become the pie master, maybe then I become the leader of all pie people, in some respect. So those are different kind of paths. Now let's take a look at the ways people learn. Because if we decide that I'm going to move into being the pie master, or start learning about how to make baked goods like cakes and cookies, we got to figure out how we're going to get it done. Like, how am I going to learn that skill? The 70-20-10, some of you may have seen this before, but did you know that we develop our skills, only 10% of the skill development comes from formal learning events like classes and like this, like webinars, right? E-learning, videos, only 10%. And this is very interesting because in my world of training, and talking to organizations for 30 years about training, they often say this to me. I'll say, well, what do your folks need to develop? And they'll tell me. And then the first question is, what classes should they take? What are the classes? Give me all the classes for them to meet. And classes are an important part. No question about it. I love classes, right? Classes are good, but they're only a small piece. 20% of learning comes from informal learning. I like to call it social learning. Sometimes it's referred that way. Talking to other people who are good at it, connecting with people. You could do that through talking to SMEs, having coffee meetings, mentoring, job shadowing, book clubs, and the like. But 70% comes from on-the-job experience, doing it, practicing. If I want to get good at baked goods, for example, or any cooking for that matter, if I watch the Food Channel, if I watch The Kitchen, that's one of my favorite cooking shows. I'm a horrible cook and I'm still trying to get better. So I watch a lot of videos, but watching The Kitchen doesn't make me a better cook or give me the skills, does it? It doesn't. I have to what? Well, I have to talk to my mom, who's a really great cook, and kind of pass it all by her first. But then I have to trial and error, right? I have to try it. I have to try it with my equipment on the job. So when we talk about the resources you need, like the time, like I said, what time do we need, and training of managers, they need the time for this, right? They need time for classes if it's applicable. They need time for on-the-job experiences, and managers need to know how to connect the skills that someone needs to develop with on-the-job experiences. That's the manager's responsibility, right? And that they are in control of that because they're in control of what you do with the time that you spend at work. Let's go to the next, please. So learning resources was the third one, right? Training and managers, organizational commitment, and now learning resources. So you might say, yeah, I'm gung-ho, ready to go. What do I need as it relates to learning resources, and what should I be focused on in order for people to be able to plug in their skill development? Well, these are just a few examples, and we're going to get a few more here momentarily for sure. So what do you need to secure? Well, you might create a partnership or with somebody who can provide for you instructor-led training, but you may very well have experts right inside your own organization who could do this inside. You might have folks who can conduct, say, a lunch and learn session or a brown bag lunch or even a class or discussion or a roundtable around a topic. Online training resources, many of them out there anymore are free. You can find a whole lot of stuff on the internet that you can use and direct your folks to. And then things like mentoring and job shadowing, we're going to hear a little bit more about. Libraries of books and videos you may still have, and you may have them even online on the job learning experiences also. So you got to secure some resources. Here are some examples. And then the last piece is putting it all together. All what I said. Now, did you capture it all? I'm sure you did. You feverishly wrote it all down. So what do we do with all that information? We have the discussion, we figure out the methods, we have all of that. We put it into a learning plan, career development plan. And so what you see here in front of you are the key elements that should be part of a career development plan. Does yours need to look like this? No, you may have some in your system, or your HRIS system, for example, may already have templates for this, but the key things to capture. Should you capture it? Yeah, because if you capture it, you got to monitor it, right? Are the skills that somebody wants to develop that we talked about in the manager meeting, right? Is it targeted to a particular career role or area like the finance department or like bakery goods, for example? What is the method? Is it going to be on the job? Is it going to be job shadowing? Is there coursework, books, so forth and so on? When and a plan for when it's going to get done, right? Got to set some goals down. We're going to do this by January. We're going to do this by March. We're going to do this by June. And then 6 and 7 on here are really how we're going to monitor the progress, because you can't just set the plan and give it to somebody and say, good luck to you. See you in January. You got to have some conversation. Why? The manager needs to create an environment where they can practice this kind of stuff on the job, right? So give me experiences. I learned some new things. Now give me a cookie that I can try to make on my own, or give me a cake that I can maybe try to frost a little bit and get good at that. So these are key elements of a career development plan. Some look like this, many don't, but these are the key elements. So that's a little bit about our career development plan and career development planning, what it is, what are some of the key elements. And Elizabeth and I, we're talking last week, and she was in preparation for this a little bit, and she was sharing some fantastic examples of organizations that she's worked with in the manufacturing sector that use some of these principles in their own organizations. And I wondered, Elizabeth, would you be able to share a couple of these with us?
Sure. Happy to. Thanks, Cheryl. Well, in manufacturing environments, it can be professional services as well. These can work. The first example is creating an apprenticeship program. So these are for folks who maybe they're relatively new in the workforce, but they have a high aptitude, and I like to think of it as transferable skills. We had a program at a company that I worked with for field technicians. And we also did a lot of veteran hiring. And with a military background, depending on what it was that the folks did, there's a lot of areas you can apply that, particularly with technical skills and the aptitude. You put those two together and you can have a fantastic workforce for what we designed for field techs. It's highly skilled, it takes years of on-the-job training to learn it. You can't necessarily learn it at school or in a trade school. But like Cheryl had mentioned, it's that job shadowing. So to describe what this was, it had elements of job shadowing. The new employees were paired with a mentor, a seasoned employee who may have 20 plus years experience. They're the ones, the go-to technicians in the company that everyone went to with questions or, hey, help me solve this problem, I'm stuck. They just had been around for so long and had seen so much around the equipment in the field that they're the ones you went to. And we had to get their buy-in to be a mentor, because that's really important. Those who want to share their knowledge and pass it on. And let's face it, maybe they were looking for an exit strategy in their career. They perhaps in the next 2 to 5 years or so were looking to retire. What an awesome way to transition out from a rigorous hands-on job to then passing down that knowledge to others. Because also, it was also a physically demanding role. So some of those gentlemen were very happy to step aside and help someone younger learn the trade, so to speak. So it provided on-the-job learning opportunities, and we defined the length of the program. It was generally 1 year, and within that 1 year of time, the new employee with transferable skills would be given the opportunity to advance through milestones. These milestones may be like 4 to 6 kind of topics, right? And underneath each milestone, you have maybe 2, 3, 4 goals that demonstrates their proficiency that they achieved in that milestone. And what I really liked about this particular program, and take from it what works for you, was that it was a year program, but for those technicians who were really savvy and had the drive, they didn't have to follow the first milestone will take you 2 months, the next one will take you 3 months. If they were really committed and wanted to work at a faster pace because they had the high aptitude and desire and motivation, they could do so. And so there were a couple technicians out of this. We did this, I think, when at that company I was there when we launched it for about 3 years. And we didn't have a lot who finished the program in under a year. However, there were at least 2 or 3 rising stars that finished it in like 9 months. Why wouldn't you help them progress faster? They're only going to be able to be self-sufficient and on their own, right? And so what we did in order to incentivize them to move quickly through the program, or at least, stick with the program, when they first hired in, they didn't have a huge salary. At the end of it, they would have quite an attractive salary. So what we did is we built in the incentives to the achievement of those milestones, and they knew what that was. It was a specific dollar amount or percentage that when you get to here, it's proficient, and your mentor signs off that yes, you've mastered it, you get that pay adjustment. And then you move through the milestones. And they also knew that by the end of the 1 year or less, if they mastered it, that would be their new salary. Now, this particular program, because it was in the trades, it wasn't an hourly with overtime component built to it. So it wasn't like a flat salary, but you could do something like this in an exempt role as well. And it also showed for those new hires that may not, they were interested and hired the little green, it also quickly showed whether that job was a good fit for them. So meaning they either self-selected out and they just weren't really with the program anymore and ended up leaving, or it showed there was a lack of progression. The milestones were set to say you should accomplish these mastery of skills, these goals within this period of time, and giving them a little bit longer if they needed to. But if it showed that they were just struggling, that they weren't really, it wasn't really a good fit, then the company would take a different route, whether that's another role in the company or if it had to be to transition them out. But I really am a big fan of apprenticeship programs. And I have another example as well to just talk about in general, skills expansion and advancement. So just talking about this in general terms, it's these are some of the benefits from it. I used to have employees come into my office in HR and say, I want to apply for other jobs. Nothing really is currently available, but I want to explore other areas. What can I do? And so I would encourage them. It does take the manager, is what Cheryl said, but it doesn't stop the employee from going and asking other people, tell me more about your role. And for those who are high achievers, well known in the company, well liked, they're the perfect ones to go to sit down right at their workstation for a few minutes and show me what you do, tell me about it. I just want to learn more about marketing or more about sales or more about whatever it may be. Take them out to lunch, ask for those things. I also encourage companies to consider the on-the-job learning opportunities through perhaps a job rotation transition plan. I was just doing a presentation yesterday where at a bank, they were talking about how they bring in their new fresh interns and they rotate them through different departments, firstly to see what they like, and secondly to see what they are really clicking with, what they're good at. And that determines, are you really good at the counter? Are you really good at the finance piece? Are you really good at auditing? And that's how they find their niche. Same thing, if it doesn't quite fit where the intern just completes their intern, they move on, the internship, and they move on, no harm, no foul. But if they would like to stay with the bank, that's how they transition them and grow them. And Raymond, we have a similar program as well. So they're fantastic, those job rotation opportunities. You're also going to have that progressive incremental training to prepare for new roles, where they get a taste for it. And this is where I created another program. This was in a manufacturing environment where you had the folks on the line in production. They were putting things together, assembly, right? And there were different levels of assembly. And then you had a whole electrical group, which was more complex, a lot more to learn, a lot more components when you were putting these machines together, for instance, and then quality inspection and so forth. It's similar to the job rotation, but in some of these cases, the different job was a step up with more pay. And so here's some benefits of having your employees experience the rotation and additional training in those other departments, so they're not just in their original role you hired them in. Firstly, it exposes them to the other jobs while they're still doing their own. It helps cover the workload. If you get them trained up to step into another department, if a company is short-staffed, people call off, there's vacancies, what are you going to do? Their part in the production assembly line is done. They have the skills then to jump to another part. So it helps with rotating. And how we incentivize those employees, because let's face it, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, it's both enriching their skills and how they can develop their own career paths, to diversify, right? Sometimes it gets a little boring doing the same thing over and over again. That's why people want to learn and grow. But the money aspect to it. So how can you incentivize them? Well, you're training them on the job to then move up into that. But what is the structure at the company? Sometimes it's not quite, the capacity isn't there, right? Or you get a bunch of orders and all of a sudden you need people to take those shifts, right? And so you can move them over. It just depends on the volume and how that works in a production environment, for instance. But what we did was, okay, once you had that mastery in that role, but you were still in your one department, when you were called over to move to that other role, you got a shift differential, for instance. So you got your regular rate of pay, but when you filled in as an electrical assembler on the line, then you got, maybe a couple bucks more per hour, however you want to structure your program, however you want to budget it. I just encourage you to make sure that it's equitable. You should have, the shift differential should be equitable, person to person, role to role in that particular description. You could also, for salaried positions, do something very similar. I had another client recently who, and I've seen this at other companies where, when someone leaves a company, it's a managerial role or a professional role, and the workload has to go somewhere, right? And so you may ask someone, to fill in, right? Or maybe they're the ones who might eventually take the role, but it's kind of in that in-between phase. What do? You really appreciate this person. They're doing a great job. It's a stretch, but they're going to step into this higher level role. How do you keep them motivated? They want to give it a shot, but you're still trying to figure things out. Are you going to promote them? Are you not? Is it temporary? What's going on? In the workforce of all these variables that we deal with. Or maybe you're not quite sure. You're going to do some restructuring and budgets and the economy and layoffs and all this stuff that we all have to figure in making these decisions. Well, if you're having them take on a little bit more in this role in case-by-case basis, you might consider doing what I call a stipend. So they're filling in, however, their salary doesn't change. It's a stipend. So it'll help with promotional paths. It'll help with well-rounded skill sets, and it steeps them into running the department's functions holistically. Once they master their job, other jobs, they've mastered their department.
Mhm.
And from there, it leads into establishing more longevity in the company to stay and grow further from that.
Wow, fantastic, Elizabeth. Those are some really good individual benefits that people get when you focus on career development. Wow, what a great benefit to the individual, right? More pay, more responsibility, wider look in the organization. That's fantastic. What's sort of the main benefit did you experience or did the organization experience having going through some of these programs? What can the organization expect to experience and benefit from doing all these things?
Great question, Cheryl. It builds your bench strength to allow employees to move up. You have a built-in staff ready to step in when you need to. Your employee engagement increases, the retention increases, and as I mentioned, longevity. There was a coworker that I remember from one of the companies I was with. He started as an intern. You hear those stories, right? I think, Gerald, you have a history with Raymond that you can share. When I'm interested to hear about this, because starting out, for instance, as an intern, as one of my coworkers did, and then he was the VP of production or operations, for instance. And at some point, you get to thinking, well, could I lead the entire organization? Even if you starting as an intern, you really holistically know the entire corporation, the entire organization. Or what about if you're starting to plan for your own retirement, and then, what happens then? So Gerald, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. How do leaders ensure a successful transition at the highest levels of the organization?
Yeah, great question, Elizabeth, especially when it comes to career development, because it really is going to be, career development is going to be a foundation of answering that question. I think whether you're talking to the business owner or the leader of a nonprofit or a governmental entity, at the end of the day, they're all maybe looking at this thing through a lens of, well, I'm at the top. Career development really doesn't apply to me, but yet it does. It does both in where they're going to continue to go in life. All too often, as a key leader is starting to think about their transition, they need to be thinking about both what's going to be next for me, and there very well could be, traditional career development aspects involved in kind of laying that path out. But also, I need to be able to, in order for me to successfully transition, I need to be able to hand off all these responsibilities I have, especially if I'm going to, depending on what paths that we take for that transition, if I'm going to pass it down to the next generation, then there is definitely going to be critical aspects of career development involved in there. If my transition path is going to be an employee stock ownership plan for my company, then I've got to be surrounded by leaders that can take my job and run with it. If I'm going to have an outside organization come in or somebody come in and step into my role, they want to be surrounded by people who know what they're doing. And that is going to add value to that situation, especially if I'm selling to a third party. It's having a well-run organization, key management team that has really picked up that ball where that key leader left off could make all the difference when it comes to what that organization is deemed to be worth when that transition takes place. So let's jump into succession planning. Part of the challenge we have to deal with is, and I'm going to focus on that owner, that key leader at the top, and their readiness, their ability to make that transition leap, whatever it's going to be. And when we look at this, 99% of owners agree when they've been surveyed, having a transition strategy is important both for my future and for the future of my organization. Totally makes sense. And we can matriculate that down through all the ranks, and it really adds substantiation for our conversation today. But when we're surveying those very same owners, we get some different perspectives on how this is really truly being dealt with. 79% have no written transition plan. 49% have done no planning whatsoever. 94% have no written personal third act plan. Those are all going to be critical elements as to whether that transition is going to successfully happen. So let's dig in deeper. The challenge for owners or any key leader, 60% do not understand their exit options. Okay. I think a lot of that is going to fall on the shoulders of successful career development. If my organization has invested the energy in bringing up all these people around me, from starting at the bottom to the people at the top, that is going to make all the difference in my ultimate people at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, being able to have a perspective that's really going to play into a successful transition for them. 30% have no transition plan in place. All right. That could really wreak some havoc on, what could inevitably happen if that person passed away at their desk, so to speak, or got hit by a bus. Whatever the situation might be, what kind of situation are they going to leave to the people behind? If this is a family-owned business and that family is counting on that business to help pay for their future, all right, and we don't have a successful plan in place, what could end up happening to that business? That nonprofit organization, any entity, these things have to be laid out from the top down, not just from the bottom up. Having a written plan, being able to wrap your arms around planning, it isn't something that can be held off to the last minute when it's a fire drill. And it just ends up being risk management, and you're really limited as to your ability to explore multiple options and add value to the organization along the way. All right, let's jump to the next slide. This is an outline at a pretty high substantial level of what this planning process could look like. We really got three phases. We've got a discover phase where we're really gathering all the facts. We're gathering all the information on the organization. We're really trying to put in front of us what are all the pieces of this puzzle that we need to gain an understanding of. If I'm looking at this through the lens of a business, all right, I need to know what the value of the business is in the eyes of others, hence having a business valuation done. I also need to understand this three-legged stool that I'm sitting on. The business is one of the legs. The financial side of things, from my personal perspective, as that business owner or owners, is another leg. And then the personal side, my ability to transition my duties, and that inevitably, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I can't tell you how many transition surveys that I've seen done. And there's a question that kind of focuses on the owner, the key leader's satisfaction 12 months after that transition is done. I've seen responses as high as 75 to 80% that they're dissatisfied in that transition. And part of that dissatisfaction, probably a big part, is coming from they never gave real serious thought to, what am I going to do next? Well, I got this list of projects and I love golfing. I'm sorry, but you're not going to spend the rest of your life golfing. And about a year into it, you're going to have taken care of that honey-do list. You're going to be done with those projects. And if you're not, you probably never wanted to or intended to get to them anyways. So, having a careful plan as to, this position in my organization, this business I had, gave me all my purpose. Where am I going to get it from when that purpose is gone? So that's got to be a critical part of this planning process. All this information gets analyzed. And then we move into this prepare phase, and we really start to peel the proverbial onion back from the standpoint of personal and financial planning. And where's my opportunity to make improvements in this business as I'm looking at this aspect of career development? Where is that going to fit into not just transitioning my responsibilities, but enhancing the value of the business along the way? Where are those opportunities for improvement? I loved some of those points that Cheryl and Elizabeth were making about those employees that are down there in the trenches and being able to pursue different paths. So Elizabeth had made a comment with respect to that intern. And Cheryl had made a comment with respect to people going in different directions. My career a long time ago started as an intern at Raymond in the tax department, which I am no longer in today. I've taken a very different direction and I've advanced in my career along the way. And having a successful career development program at Raymond definitely helped to drive that. That is the sort of thing that is really going to add substantial value to organizations. It's not just about keeping somebody's butt in the seat of their job and making them happy. It's about those other factors that are going to come from this process that's really going to add value to the organization. So as we look at this process from that business owner, key leader lens coming down, I now put myself in this loop where I'm continuing to find those improvements, enhance this process, and that can take me to being able to make a decision as to I'm ready to exit, or boy, I'm having fun. I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction. So let's dig further. Next slide, please. So as I take a high level look at transition planning, what's really going to be involved in this? It's actually pretty simple. I need to have a coach that is really going to own this process, help hold me, that leader, business owner, accountable, and guide me through all the elements. Plan development is going to be all about analyzing the business, analyzing data, pulling this all together, coming up with pulling all the stuff out of the numbers, the conversations, the perspectives, and baking it all down into a written plan with action items that we can then work through, hold ourselves accountable, and measure progress. Plan implementation is really going to cover this whole perspective. Often this gets looked at through the lens of tangible asset growth, risk management, which is really asset protection, and what transition option am I going to choose? But there's also all this intangible asset growth, which often has the potential of adding even more value to the business than the tangible side. We're in the weeds on it today when we're talking about human capital. That really makes up the fiber of our business. Our customer, our structural and our social aspects of our business are all going to tie into this too. Next slide.
Gerald, I'm curious, as we kind of come into the home stretch here with the few minutes we have left, how do you advise leaders of organizations to take those next steps for succession planning?
Yeah, Elizabeth, as I have these discussions, part of what we're going to do is look at this plan development process, and I think once we start to kind of walk through what some of these deliverables look like, owners really start to see what this can do for me. Next slide. And as we dig deeper, it really is going to be a matter of taking some critical elements. Stakeholder alignment is obviously going to be a good one. I want to make sure everybody that's involved in this process, other owners, my family, key employees, we're all on the same page and we're working towards a common goal. Next slide. Business continuity. This is going to be a critical one. This is making sure that I've addressed all those items that, God forbid, something happens and they're just lost in the weeds. They're buried in a file drawer. They just haven't been thought about, are pulled to the surface and addressed in a way that is really going to ensure ongoing success. Next slide. Business owner reliance. This is all about career development, bringing those people up around me. And guess what? Now it starts flowing down. If I want those key leaders right underneath me to be able to take the stuff off my plate, they're going to need to bring people up behind them and so on. And it just adds to the importance of career development from the top down. Next slide. And value enhancement. I talked about that earlier. All these things are going to have intrinsic impacts on the value of the business and continue to drive that future success of the business. And they're going to be woven in the thought process of this succession planning process, which is going to intersect with career development. Often, my employees out there, as they're looking at their own career development, their ideas are going to add up and they're all going to have an impact on that ultimate value of the business. So it's not just about benefiting myself, it's about benefiting all of them along the way too. Next slide.
Well, thanks, Gerald. Wow, that was so insightful in how we might use something like business transition or succession planning, using the career development methodology to help us ensure our business stays afloat and people get developed and get into key roles. We appreciate that. So we're mostly at the end of the presentation today. So whether you're an entry-level employee, right, wanting to build a successful career, maybe you're a manufacturing machine operator or assembler looking to advance into another role or management, or maybe even an organizational leader, as Gerald tells us today, looking to transition and ensure the continuity of your business or your team. Career development plans are necessary, and they're necessary for a variety of reasons. And in summary today, what did we learn? So what did we learn today? Well, we learned a few things, right? Career development is about preparation, right? It's about preparing me, not waiting, not having the job opening posted, and then we do career development. No, we do career development now so that when the posting happens, I'm ready and I'm slid right into perhaps a new role or an expanded role, for example. Career development planning is a talent attraction and retention necessity. It impacts that greatly. What else did we learn? Everybody has a plan. Everybody should have a plan. If everybody doesn't have a plan, that's what you should be doing. You have to have organizational commitment. And when I say organizational commitment, that can be organization-wide, full. It could be team, division, even smaller team, management area has to have the commitment. Managers are the key and need to be trained. We need to provide guidance and tools. Have you trained them? Do they know how to do this? Many managers struggle with having career development, not because they're incapable by any means, because no one's ever taken the time to share that with them. And learning resources are required. A structured approach, as Elizabeth described today, a couple of them, right? A few structured approaches to apprentice programs and the like can be helpful, right? Put some framework around it and sort of have some methodology. That's fantastic. And succession planning is a piece of the pie here when it comes to career development. And it is especially great at the highest levels, but not exclusive at the highest levels. Think about your key folks in the organization. Who would you hate to leave? And what if they left? Do they have someone behind them ready to come in and take over? And that goes for the team level, organizational level, division level, all of the levels. Sort of some of the key summary takeaways today. Next slide, please. So start now. You're ready, you're motivated, you're excited. I want to get started tomorrow. Cheryl, what do I need to do right now? I'm going to get off this call. It's still morning. It'll be afternoon in 5 minutes. What do I need to do? So are you committed? Are you willing to put in the time? Do you have the time? What kind of time do you need? Do people have plans? Get them started on getting plans. How are you going to train your managers? How are you going to provide guidance? Do you have something in place already through your systems, right? Maybe your HRIS systems or others. Are there templates you already have that you can use for documentation? Take inventory of your learning resources. You probably already have some. And you probably already have smart people who can help you with some of the training and skill acquisition parts of this. And do you have succession or transition plans for those key roles or for your organization as a whole if you're a business looking to transition? Elizabeth, wrap us up today.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. Well, as we close out today's webinar, I want to remind everyone that we have recorded today's session and we'll make it available to you within the next 24 hours. If you have questions following today's session, please feel free to reach out to our team directly. Our email is hrsolutions@raymond.com. This session qualifies for 1 SHRM and HRCI credit. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to having you join us again. We're planning more webinars on trending HR topics to share with you soon. So have a great week ahead.